Number 1. Good night.
I was out hunting in northern Ontario. No roads within 130 kilometers. I was late on bear season, so no one was out hunting in my quadrant. I found a nice campsite alongside a river and hunted from there. On the second day of my hunt, I came across the bear tracks I tracked for about 2 hours and then turned around. This is when shit got really fucking weird. I always track on one side of the tracks and return on the other. Around 200 meters down the east side of the tracks, I ran into another human footprint, which disappeared across the trail and went into the woods on the west. My dog didn't seem to smell anything, so I returned to the camp with minimal concern. I got back to camp at around 7:30 at night, made a quick dinner, and had a cigar by the camp. At around 12, I heard a snap of a branch. After hunting for 20 years, only two things snap branches: bears and humans. I grabbed my firearm and a flashlight and went out after the noise. Every 100 yards, I would scan with the flashlight. My dog freaked, started growling and advancing into the woods slowly. I pulled back on the leash to slow his advance and switched on my flashlight. I saw a pair of eyes looking right at me. It stared for about 5 seconds and disappeared into the woods. On the walk back, I felt anxious, scared, and uncomfortable. I could feel someone watching me. The next night, the same thing happened. My dog went wild. Like I've never seen him like that. He was whimpering, growling, and clearly very anxious. At this point, I was terrified. I didn't go hunting that day and didn't close my eyes once. That night, I sat up with my flashlight, constantly scanning the tree line. I guess I dozed off at around 1 and woke up again at 3. I was sweating, confused, and very scared. I scanned the forest, and just barely visible, about 25 yards in the forest, there was a man and his dog. He was looking right back at me. I started to approach him, shouting to him. I got within 10 feet. He looked awfully disheveled and stank. The worst part was he just stared and smiled. His eyes showed zero emotion and whispered, "Good night." I ran back to my tent, packed it into my pack, and loaded it onto the trailer of my ATV and drove out of there. Number 2. Can you hear me?
When I was about 10, I was reading in my room late at night. I had gotten up to use the bathroom, and on my way back to bed, I stood right in front of a woman figure. She was golden spongy looking, but you could just tell it was a woman. I stood there saying to myself, "Shut up, it's just your imagination." So I put my hand out to touch her, and she moved her hand out to do the same. I ran and jumped in my bed, scared to death. My mother had died about 9 years ago. She had been very sick, mentally as well as physically. We had a bad relationship. A few months ago, I was laying in bed, almost asleep, when I heard her voice, crystal clear as if she were in the room with me. She sounded angry and scared and yelled, "Can you hear me?" A split second after, my baby boy wakes up crying. Number 3. Near miss.
Years back, I was traveling Labor Day weekend to the beach. It was a 3-hour drive and highway was congested. I was driving at a steady pace, let's say 70 miles per hour, right along with the traffic. Anyway, I had been driving behind the same car for miles, and the same car behind me, so I was aware of who was around me. Anyway, I go to light my cigarette, and my lighter isn't where I last put it. I'm searching all over my car, and nope, no damn lighter anywhere. I get off the next exit, and to add to my irritation, I take the wrong way off the exit. So I turn around, find the closest gas station, I run inside to buy a damn lighter, and I jump back into my car. And sitting in my passenger seat is my fucking lighter. I was so confused. I would have seen it there. So I go get back on the highway, and traffic is moving at a snail's pace. As I drive a little bit down the highway, I see the car that was in front of me flipped over on the side of the highway, and the car that was behind me was on the other side of the highway with a few more crashed cars. It had just happened, as there was no ambulances or police. I was in shock. Intense motions were flooding out of my head. I got off the next exit, pulled over, and sobbed. I have no idea what would have happened to me if my lighter hadn't gone missing, but it was pretty obvious that the outcome wouldn't have been very good. Number 4. I saw a man wearing a fedora in my bedroom.
I woke up a few nights in a row around the same time in the early morning hours. I looked at the end of my bed, and my husband was next to me. The room was dark, and I sat up to a dark figure wearing a fedora-type hat and what looked like a trench coat. No facial features, just black. It appeared to have a male form, and like I said, no facial features, but I still felt like it was staring at me, and it was really pissed off at me. This happened a few nights in a row. I did some research, and I looked it up on the internet, and found other people have experienced something similar. Some people attribute it to sleep paralysis, but I have seen shadows before in previous homes, just not like this one, in both form and an extremely threatening presence. So who knows, but it was scary as hell.
Number 5. Stalked for years.
Back when AIM was big and I was 14, I went to an anime convention. I wanted to make some friends there, so I met some people and gave them my AIM screen name so that after the convention, we can keep in touch. After the con, only one person contacted me. I couldn't remember precisely who he was, but I gathered that he was a guy and a couple of years older than me. Our conversations were very normal at first. How are you? What's up? Those sort of things. But then he started to talk about sex. Like I mentioned, at the time, I was 14, and I was a late bloomer, so I wasn't interested in sex at all. I remember during one of these conversations, he mentioned that it would be funny to see me having sex. I responded awkwardly and tried to change the subject. Then he started sending me pictures. The pictures he sent me were of his penis photoshopped into a mushroom, but the penis underneath was still very obvious and apparent. I freaked out and stopped talking to him immediately. After a couple of weeks, I blocked him and changed my screen name, just to be sure. About 3 years later, I had forgotten about him and was going on with my life as usual. Then I got an email in my inbox. I read it, and to my disbelief, it was from the same guy. I remembered his AIM screen because it was very distinctive. The email said something like, "Hey, I talked to you a couple of years ago and found your email by Googling your old AIM screen name." I was like, what the fuck? Because my new email address had nothing to do with my old AIM screen name. I had stopped using the AIM name years ago. In fact, I hadn't even used AIM in over a year. I deleted and ignored the email. A couple of years after that, I am in college. I took an abnormal psychology course that was held in a lecture hall. After the first week, I started getting to know the people sitting around me. One guy in particular seemed to know me. I didn't remember him at all. He mentioned meeting me at a convention a couple of years ago. Still, I wasn't concerned because, at this point, I'd been to about 20 conventions, to a year since I was 13. I pretended like I remembered him to avoid the awkwardness of the situation. He gave me his Facebook name, so as I was sitting in class, I pulled up his Facebook page. I looked over his general information, and then I saw it. The same AIM screen name that kept haunting me. I tried to not freak out right there in class, but chills ran down my spine. How the hell could a guy I met at a convention, blocked, turn up a couple of years later in my email, then turn up once again in my psychology class in my college?
Number 6. Good thing I woke up.
When I was a young child, living in one of the high crime areas of town, I woke up in the middle of the night, out of nowhere. This was something that never, ever happened to me, given how sound of a sleeper I was. I left my bedroom, went down the stairs, and past the front door to get to the kitchen. After getting a drink of water, I turned around to go back upstairs to my bedroom. The front door was open. It hadn't been open just a moment ago. Our car had been broken into a day earlier, so I was already on high alert. I stood, completely frozen, staring at that door for a good 10 minutes before I could bring myself to move. When I finally did go over and shut the door, our porch creaked in the background, as though someone was walking on it as I closed it. It was the scariest moment of my childhood. I still get the willies thinking about it.
Number 7. Prankster ghost.
I had a family member pass away, and after that I kept seeing this crow coming around. It would land on the back of the work truck and stay there while we were driving. It would also land on the roof, where I was working, and continue to call at me over and over. A few weeks later, I'm watering my garden, and the crow is up in the tree calling at me. I look up and say, "What's up, Uncle Nick?" As soon as I turn to return to the house and turn off the hose, I get sprayed in the back with it. I instantly whip around and look, and it's laying about 6 or 7 feet from me, just trickling out on the ground. I don't know how it happened, but it definitely scared me. Number 8. Shadowy Spiderman.
I have no evidence, nor do I have any other witnesses. But I remember sleeping at a friend's house one night, on the floor next to his bed. The way I was positioned was that I was facing the closed bedroom door, and I had fallen asleep almost instantly. It was around 3 in the morning. I had woken up almost icy frozen, and with sleep paralysis and that feeling of terror. I could only move my eyes, and when I did, I looked and saw a figure above the door in the top corner of the ceiling, holding itself up like Spider-Man. There was no way to describe what it looked like, because it seemed shapeless, yet I could make out arms and legs, and it sounded like it was making clicking noises, like it was rattling its teeth, fidgeting around, scratching itself fast enough it looked like motion blur. In horror, I stared at this thing, now unable to look away, until it decided to climb down onto the floor and open the fucking door and slip out into the house. At that moment, I bolted to the door, closed it, and turned on the lights, waking my friend in the process. I asked my friend about it, and he grew a little pale, but he only seen shadows, but nothing graphic like that.
Number 9. They're scratching my face.
I was babysitting my 4-year-old cousin last week. Everything was normal. I put him to bed, read him a book, and he fell asleep. 20 minutes later, I'm lying on the couch, and I hear him whispering from the hallway. I get up and sneak up to hear what he's saying. "They're scratching at my face. They're scratching at my face." He said it in a calm voice. I asked him, "Who?" But he didn't answer. I walked him back to bed. Despite my racing heartbeat, shit seemed like it was straight out of a movie.
Number 10. He was filming us.
When I was about 8 years old, I was playing at a local park with my best friend who was 7. This was during the time of get yourself home before streetlights come on. It was getting very dark, but not dark enough for us to go home. We lived in a small, well-to-do village in Lake District, where everyone knew each other and everyone was friendly. Well, in the eyes of an 8-year-old. We were both playing on a swing set when I looked at a nearby house and saw a guy, mid-30s, filming us. Just standing on his doorstep with a camera pointing straight at us. Being naive, we just ignored him. But 10 minutes later, he was still there, the camera up to his eye, looking at us. We freaked out and ran home to tell our parents. Their response, "If it happens again, tell us and we'll call the police." Typing this out doesn't convey the soul-freezing fear I felt at the time, but just thinking back makes me feel cold and paranoid. This is Mr.
And Mrs. Fright Nights.
I hope you enjoyed the video.
Please like and subscribe and give us some ideas in the comments below.
And remember, dusk is the monster's dawn.